your sales reps. They will either be your best friend in terms of helping your customers get onboarded into this digital technology, or your worst enemy. It's up to you which one they end up being. And it's all about aligning incentives.
You're listening to Inside Commerce, a weekly e-commerce strategy, technology and CX focused podcast hosted by experienced digital consultants and re-platform specialists James Gedd and Paul Rogers. Get insights into e-commerce strategy of leading brands, hear from industry thought leaders and leading tech vendors with practical advice to help you improve your online CX. This podcast is sponsored by WorldPay. We're driving back into B2B e-commerce and we've got one of the leading experts globally on this. So delighted to have him on. I'll let him introduce himself in a moment, but first let me set the scene of what you're going to get from today's episode. We're looking at the fact that B2B commerce is growing massively and the sophistication within B2B commerce and the technology and the ecosystem around it is growing as well. AI is obviously having a big impact in terms of how B2B buyers are buying and the technology solutions sellers are putting in place. And also B2B buyers are maturing and growing up digital native, and that's changing the kind of dynamics of what buyers expect from the sellers. So I've got Jason Greenwood with me today. He runs Greenwood Consulting, which is one of the leading global B2B consultancies. He's also the godfather of podcasting in e-com, who's run the E-commerce Edge podcast for over 10 years now. So three years longer than we've been going. So Jason, a warm welcome.
Thank you so much. Hopefully I can live up to that incredible introduction. It's a privilege to be here. It's always a privilege to speak to other experts in the industry. Look, none of us have a monopoly on good ideas. None of us have a monopoly on experience. I've been doing this for 26 years, but I still learn new things literally every single day. And I think, I hope that I continue to learn new things every day until I die. And so I think that's really the key point here, is that no matter how much we know, no matter how much experience we have, no matter how many projects we work on, we all have things to learn. And certainly the pace of change in B2B commerce today is such that, even us old hats that have been doing this for a long time, there are new challenges facing us every day, new opportunities that we're being presented with, not just because of AI, but just because the technology that we historically have used for B2B has oftentimes been adaptations of retail e-commerce technology. And now, over the last 5 plus years, there's been, dedicated technology designed and built from the ground up for manufacturers, distributors, and wholesalers to do digital commerce better. And certainly that's making our lives easier, but it means that we have to adapt and we have to get up to speed on what these technologies are so that we can develop and recommend the right things for our customers. So that would be the thing I would lead off with here, is that even those of us that have been in this space for a really long time, the rate of change is accelerating. Digital's always been fast, right? It's always been faster than like traditional back office IT, but especially over the last couple of years with the advent of AI, it's accelerated even faster.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And actually one thing I find really interesting is, having been in e-com for over 20 years as well, is that we're coming into this current expansion of technology and adaptation of new techs, basically as non-natives to it. We, our career paths have been, from analog into digital, and then hybrid models, and then to proper adoption of e-commerce, e-procurement, you name it. Whereas for the younger generation, people growing up in their mid-20s to mid-20s, they're coming in where AI is just how you think. It's not what does AI now mean? It's like, well, AI is what we're using in our lives. They're used to digital first thinking. They're used to mobile first. So actually, the way that you can learn from younger generations in terms of how they adopt and use technologies, I personally think that's a massive benefit for people who've been in the industry a bit longer.
Well, you make a very good point. And I mentioned this because we were on stage recently last week at B2B E-commerce World UK and Europe. And one of the things that I brought up from the stage that caused people to gasp from the audience was, I remember a day not that long ago, probably 15 years ago, when people were applying to work in agencies that I was running, and they would put expert Googler on their CV. And literally, like, people laugh about that now. Like it would be ridiculous to put expert Googler on your CV today, but the equivalent of putting expert Googler on your CV today is, I'm an expert AI prompt engineer, right? And we're gonna, within the next 1, 2, 3 years, it's going to be just as ridiculous to put AI prompt engineer, AI expert on your CV as it was back then, as it would be today to put expert Googler on your CV. That's how fast the technology is moving. But there's one thing that continues to stand out for me beyond the tech. And don't get me wrong, I'm an early adopter of technology just as much as the next guy or girl. But the reality is that the need to exercise the digital muscle, the need to develop skill sets in-house, the need to develop uniquely human traits, the things that make us special as human beings, the ability to have taste, the ability to have human conversations and stream of consciousness thought like we're having right now. These things are skill sets and abilities and talents and character traits that will never go away. At least it's certainly not in our lifetime, and they will never cease to be important. I mean, you see the younger generation, and I see them at conferences, at events, at meetups, etc., and they really struggle. They struggle more than ever before to go up and have a conversation with someone that they don't yet know. Whereas maybe those of us that are a little bit more old school, we had to do that. Like that was just normal. We had to do that in order to make new friends, in order to grow our network and all that sort of stuff. And even even pre LinkedIn days. I was one of the earliest joiners of LinkedIn, but before that, networking was a physical thing. So you had to go up and meet new people. You had to be able to have conversations that mattered to them and give them space to tell you about themselves and what matters to them and what's going on in their life and their personal life, etc. And I think those skills are going to continue to be the skills that differentiate us as human beings from artificial intelligence. And make no mistake about it, it is artificial.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point, actually. In B2B specifically, I don't work with as many B2B companies as you do, but relationships are critical, absolutely critical for a lot of this is long-term supplier relationships. And you're right, it's understand how you can automate things to give people better self-serve tools is great, but fundamentally the value of the underlying relationship and the trust between buyer and seller is critical to that long-term success and profitability. So before we get into the question, actually, do you want to give people a flavor for the sort of work that you do at Greenwood Consulting?
Yeah, so when I first started my consultancy just over 6 years ago, I worked exclusively with manufacturers and distributors and wholesalers. And I was always working with sort of size of company, 20 million plus in revenue, maybe had an e-commerce experience, maybe not, but they were oftentimes digital laggards, meaning that they had a experience that was substandard. Not a lot of their sales processes were automated, still heavy usage of human beings for kind of every aspect of their business and every interaction. But certainly in B2B e-commerce, we have not just, when we think of digital transactional selling in the B2B world, the B2B world, it has a inherent amount of complexity in it that we just don't see in the B2C and D2C world, it through many different lenses. But even if we just look at the typical digital commerce channels, B2B has 3, whereas retail e-commerce has 1, right? So in B2B, we have self-service e-commerce like what retail knows, where you can log into a website, a portal, you can add stuff to your cart, you can check out with it, whatever. But then we have these other 2 digital channels, which are extremely common in the B2B world. One is EDI, electronic data interchange, where the transaction is done effectively between 2 ERPs talking to each other digitally. A PO is generated in one ERP. It's integrated as a sales order into the receiving ERP, and then the order gets processed and sent out. Then we have what's known as Punchout. And Punchout is effectively a digital cataloging system on the supply side. And then on the buy side, we have what's called e-procurement systems or e-procurement engines. Now, those can either be part of an ERP or standalone e-procurement systems that allow procurement managers, specialists, buyers, category managers, etc., to create an entire buy list based on the receipt of digital catalogs from suppliers into their procurement system, as if they had logged into an e-commerce portal to make the purchase, but they're actually structuring the purchase in their procurement system. So those are historically who I've worked with. But then about 2 years into my consultancy, I started getting inbound requests for consulting from SIs and agencies, from platform vendors in the B2B world, from investors in the B2B space. And they said, hey, we know you work with manufacturers and distributors, but do you work with people like us? Can you help upskill us? Can you help train us? Can you help effectively be a fractional B2B lead if it's maybe an SI who there's a ton of agencies out there that have historically specialized in B2C and D2C, and they don't even know the questions to ask in discovery of a B2B business. They don't really know how to do solution architecture for B2B projects. They really don't know how to speak the language of B2Bs. And so they don't really know how to go out there and win B2B business, because it's all about trust. And if you don't speak the language of B2Bs, then they don't trust you. And if they don't trust you, they're not going to buy from you. And so I started to develop new frameworks and new consulting frameworks specifically for those other 3 cohorts of customer. But in all cases, all 4 cohorts, it's all B2B focused.
Ready to grow your business online? With WorldPay e-commerce, you can deliver fast, secure payments your customers love, backed by global reach and real people-powered support. Scale with confidence and enhance your customers' experience with WorldPay e-commerce.
That's really interesting, actually. That's the last one you touched upon, because it's in all e-commerce projects there are gotchas, complexities, known unknowns, unknown unknowns, and if you don't know the classic like things that trip you up, you can get to a point in discovery where you've got what looks like a good solution, but actually it will unwind when you're in development, because you'll have all of these systemic problems where you cannot do things. The data points don't work, the flows don't work. So yeah, I think that's a really, really interesting skill set to bring in to support agencies.
Yeah, and look, it's something where they see they want to try to skate where the puck is going, and they recognize that there's more inbound B2B inquiries. So let's say they're just a Shopify agency. They've never worked with any other e-commerce platform, and there are lots of agencies out there like that where they specialize in Shopify and nothing else, because the demand for Shopify builds is higher than any other platform. And so they specialize. And so, yes, more recently over the last couple of years, Shopify has added more B2B capability. They've added more B2B data primitives, but it's still early. It's still very, very early days when it comes to Shopify B2B capability. And there's plenty of apps out there that add more capability for B2B on top of core Shopify. But if you've only ever worked with Shopify, you most likely do not have a deep appreciation and understanding for the complexity of B2B, because you never been exposed to it. And so they're looking to build credibility with their customers. And so oftentimes I'm called in to sort of lead those first couple of phone calls and engagements with the customer, to give them confidence that we know what we're talking about, and that we're going to be architecting the right thing for them, that we're going to be helping them with the people, the process, the tech, the data, and oftentimes the tech is one of the last things we think about in the B2B world, because there's so much more to running a B2B enterprise than the tech, right? The tech is important, and I don't want to downplay the importance of good quality, cutting edge technology to these businesses, but oftentimes they have many other things they need to deal with and resolve before they're ready to go through a major digital transformation project inside their business. And so obviously if they're, and one of the other things that makes B2B so unique and special is that 9 times out of 10, I'm dealing with like a second or third generation family owned company in manufacturing or distribution. It's very rarely are they public companies. They're $400 or $500, $600 million distribution company that is third generation family owned. And so they oftentimes have been doing things the same way for maybe for 100 years, and it's worked really, really well for them. But some data came out of Forrester a couple of years ago, which really made me stop and think, which was by the end of 2024, which is 2 years ago now, which is crazy to imagine, but by the end of 2024, over 70% of B2B buyers in the United States were millennials or Gen Z.
Yeah.
So the reality is they're digital natives. So the buying demographic is changing really rapidly. The procurement demographic is changing really rapidly. We've got more women in the industry now than ever before. We've got more minorities in the industry than ever before. We just have a younger, more diverse generation doing the buying inside these enterprises. And unfortunately, the sell side, these manufacturers and distributors that have been around for 100 years, they've been slower to adapt. And one of the reasons for that is that we have a lot of tribal and institutional knowledge inside these organizations, inside sales reps and sales teams' heads, right? And they've been in these industries in many cases for 30 plus years. Now, as these people continue to age out of the industry, they retire, they die, etc. We are now having to get this data out of their heads and into a system that is scalable, right? Because before it always felt like voodoo, right? These sales reps that have been in the industry for 30 years, they know on the network drive where they need to go and get a spec sheet to be able to email to their customer. They know, on their desktop, they've got, a spreadsheet with all their customers' price lists, and they can email prices off to their customers. Like they kind of surrounded themselves with this untouchable aura that meant that these businesses relied on these salespeople to do not only the heavy lifting of relationship building, but also all of the selling, all of the transactional input. So they'd go out to the field, they take an order from a customer, they come back to the office, they key in the order directly into an ERP system. And the problem is that's just not scalable. And it's especially not scalable where you are starting to lose this tribal knowledge out of your businesses at an accelerated rate. So my advice to any B2B out there today who's relying 95% of their revenue is coming through salespeople, they are at risk of losing those salespeople either to competitors or to attrition and retirement. And if you don't get that knowledge out of their head into something and into a system that's designed for that and designed to be scalable one to many, you're going to have real problems when you lose these 30-year-old experts from your industry.
Yeah. That raises an important question for me. I typically work with, in B2B, I've worked with some standalone B2B sellers, but mainly it's hybrid B2B, B2C, where they've got a really big wholesale arm and they've got lots of different retailers who are buying, like proper wholesalers plus retailers purchasing for them. And one of the things they do struggle with is they have very archaic manual processes. It isn't scalable. And the buyers in the retail channels, specifically from a trade point of view, are matching that younger demographic, what their expectation is and how they browse, what they expect they do, and most of the stuff on mobile as well, not on a desktop. That changes the demands from the seller point of view. But as you modernize your tech stack and increase automation, that changes the skill set you need internally within your selling team. I'd love you to talk a bit about how is this impacting B2B companies in terms of the roles they need, the type of person they need in order to interface properly with modern buyers?
I think what it really takes is, more than anything else, someone who recognizes the shift in buying patterns and buying expectations, and especially around the experiences of those buying patterns, and someone who's willing to embrace. Like I'm 51, right? So the reality is I'm not a young buck anymore myself, but the reality is I'm cutting edge with social, I'm cutting edge with technology, I'm cutting edge with it. So I don't think it's so much an age thing. I think it's an attitude thing more than anything else. And so one of the barriers that I encounter 9 times out of 10 when I'm working with a manufacturer or distributor, especially if they're a pure play manufacturer or distributor and they don't have a retail play, is getting over the first hurdle of the sales team, because there is oftentimes massive resistance to any form of digitalization or automation by sales teams. But usually, if I can be given 10 minutes with a sales team or 15 minutes with a sales team in one of those first early meetings, because oftentimes I'm engaging with leadership first and sales second. And I always tell the leadership team, look, we need to get sales on board the bus because at the end of the day, they are an absolutely mission critical part of your organization, and they will torpedo your project and your successful outcomes faster than anybody else if they think this is going to pick their pocket, right? And so if I can get 10 minutes with a sales team, I'll walk in. They think I'm the devil when you're the guy that's going to replace us with the robots. You're the guy that's going to replace us with the machines. You're the guy that's going to replace us with this e-commerce, solution or whatever it may be. And I am there to tell them genuinely, I think sales is still one of the most underrated skill sets in the world. It's so underrated that the people that are genuinely expert at it are going to be in demand for the foreseeable future, at least the next 20, 30 years. But what I'm there to do is I'm there to take away the things they hate doing. And I don't know a single sales rep alive who likes administrative duties. They don't like
hundreds of orders.
Yeah. So they They don't like maintaining CRM systems. They don't like keying in orders. They don't like searching network drives for information for their customers. They don't like responding to emails. They don't like responding to WhatsApp messages and Slack messages and Teams messages, which is how they're receiving messages from their customers from all these different channels. And oftentimes the customer's just asking, what's this SKU? What's this price? What's my MOQ? They're asking just really mundane things that the sales reps are forced to respond to because they don't have a digital version of that information to be able to give to their customer through a self-service anything. And the second thing that usually helps me to become their friend is not only am I looking to take away, and we've measured it. So we know that in these B2B orgs, the ones that track time by activity type, that anywhere from 40 to 60% of a sales rep's time is spent on admin. So that is totally unproductive work that does not actually put any additional commission in their back pocket. And so what I'm there to do is I'm there to take away at least half of that time that is spent doing admin stuff, offload that to digital systems. And then secondarily, I'm there to give them superpowers so that they can actually sell more and scale more and actually have more accounts in their portfolio that they can make money from. Then I also have to have a very difficult conversation with the sales leadership or the leadership of the company, because oftentimes they want to reduce the amount of commission paid for transactions that go through digital channels. Now that's talk about cutting off your nose to spite your face. Like if you want to ensure that your sales reps will not help onboard your customers into digital channels, just disincentivize them, because as my friend Jason Hine from the B2BA is fond of saying, sales reps are coin operated. And at the end of the day, you get what you incent, right? And at the end of the day, if you take away the incentive for your sales reps, they will either be your best friend in terms of helping your customers get onboarded into this digital technology, or your worst enemy. It's up to you which one they end up being. And it's all about aligning incentives. And so the businesses I see succeeding the most with getting their legacy sales teams on board with digital technology is to either at least have the incentive be at parity regardless of the channel that the sale comes through. Or I tell you what, if you want to get every single one of your customers into your digital channels, buying exclusively through digital channels tomorrow, make it so that they make 20%, make it so that your sales reps make 20% more commission on digitally acquired sales transactions than physically acquired sales transactions. And in every single one of your customers by tomorrow will be transacting online. And so it is just about aligning incentives. And sure, there will always be a percentage of sales reps that will be resistant to new technology just because it's new, not because it's bad, but because it's new and because it's different and because they have to learn something new. But in my experience, that's a very small percentage of your team. The lion's share, as long as they can be made comfortable with the new technology, as long as they can be trained, as long as they can be onboarded, as long as they can be made comfortable with using the new technology. And the funny thing is that I don't know a sales rep alive that likes living in an ERP. ERPs they do not have a good user interface for sales reps. They just don't. CRMs sometimes do, but even then, CRMs oftentimes are not that user-friendly for sales teams. And so if they can do kind of everything that they do today on behalf of their customers through a portal experience in the back end, or log in as their customer and do a lot of that work on their customer's behalf, creating draft orders, creating, quotes, doing all that stuff through this portal that's designed for commerce. Like e-commerce portals, they're designed for commerce. They're designed for transactions. They're designed for information sharing. If you can get them on board, if they can see the value in that, they will sometimes be the biggest proponents of digital technology in the entire company.
And where do you see, so technology is obviously moved on fast. You talked about Shopify. Shopify's massively invested in B2B, but it comes from a very low level compared with like leading B2B specialist vendors. The market's quite diverse. You've got hybrid models like a Spryker, you've got Oro Commerce, Better Commerce, Big Commerce, which is historically been very strong in B2B in the US specifically. And then you've got more modern platforms that I guess there's a lot of platforms call themselves AI first now. Which platforms do you think are adapting the smartest and quickest to providing like the depth of feature set that B2B companies need? And then we can get into maybe some specific vendor examples.
Yeah, look, I think BigCommerce for a long time had the pole position in kind of the lower mid-market businesses. They were never really a true enterprise platform for enterprises. Like if you're a $500 million distributor, you're probably not going to go on BigCommerce at any point in its history. You may have, but that would probably be your first foray into e-commerce. But if you were experienced in e-commerce, you probably weren't going to be using Shopify or Big. But the BigCommerce, and I'll just speak to them specifically because they had an opportunity when they acquired Bundle B2B a few years ago. They had an opportunity to consolidate the mid-market in B2B and really kind of own that as their own thing. And I think that bus has passed them by. I think the fact that it's still an app, I think the fact that it's still got different API endpoints to the rest of the platform, I think the fact that it really hasn't been enhanced or improved that much over the last 5 years, I think they really missed that boat. And I think they were massively distracted with Fido and MakeSwift. I think they don't know who the hell they are. And so I really haven't been in a position to be able to recommend their platform to at least my customers for probably 3 to 4 years now. And that's a real shame because for a long time, I was one of the biggest proponents and I worked on many BigCommerce projects over the years where they were literally the only solution in that price point for those merchants. They were literally the only one that would do the job. And so it actually breaks my heart that they kind of ended up where they ended up. But looking beyond them and looking beyond Shopify, because, I think Shopify would even say themselves when you talk to them that they are really a great fit for D2C brands that are expanding and dipping their toes in the water of wholesale, like at scale. I think they're a great fit for those opportunities. Where they're not a great fit is for the true B2B hard goods sellers, the industrial distributors, the HVAC manufacturers, the hardcore B2B goods sellers that have high complexity in their sales processes, have ultra high complexity in their product set, have ultra high complexity in their pricing models, have ultra high complexity in configure price quote capability, have ultra high needs from a PIM perspective. They just have such advanced needs that these platforms they can't stand up to that level of requirement. So where we see platforms today really winning are those ones that either are pure B2B platforms or always since their inception had significant B2B capability and have built that out in parallel with their B2C and D2C capability. So on platforms like Vtex, platforms like Kibo Commerce, platforms like Verto Commerce, platforms like Oro, there are a range of B2B platforms out there that have always been strong with their B2B capability. And they've always had, for example, the concept of, price lists built into their platform. They've had the concept of buyer hierarchies in their platform and escalations and, allocations, custom catalogs. I mean, if we compare what's possible in terms of customer specific and restricted catalogs, meaning customer A gets this set of SKUs and customer B gets this set of SKUs, Shopify and Big really struggle in those types of environments, right? And so we are in a situation now where AI is allowing those vendors who have always had B2B as a priority to continue to pull away even further and faster from the platforms that are just now really starting to think seriously about B2B capability. And that's kind of where we're at today.
Yeah, one of the interesting dynamics in the market is that vendors and agencies obviously are adjusting to the fact that increasingly more tools can basically let people self-serve, the ability to write. And I'm not saying that people with development skills can just go away and write brilliant code, because there lies all sorts of dangers without proper engineering skills. But I guess there's a need to react to the fact that it's much easier now for people to create solutions using like modern technology to plug in to existing infrastructure to provide like commerce capabilities rather than having to have a platform that does everything. So it's definitely interesting to see how they're reacting and where they're focused. But I think that, it resonates from what I'm seeing is the majority of people I know who would consider Shopify B2B are those who are predominantly a B2C company. They have trade or they have wholesale, and actually solid consolidation into a single platform would improve internal efficiency and automation. but they don't have advanced needs. And the areas where, like you, I used to be really, really hot on big commerce was around things like more complex account structures and the hierarchies. And when you've got like not just a parent child, but you've got triple layers and you've got different invoicing requirements and different catalogs pricing across all the different child entities. But it definitely seems that part of the SaaS market is probably falling away a little bit.
Yeah, look, I think what these B2C, like they all started out, like if you look at BigCommerce or you look at Shopify or Volusion or any of those SaaS, those first gen SaaS e-commerce platform vendors, the reality is they started out as pure play B2C, D2C platforms. Like that was their focus, right? They never ever thought about enterprise B2B at all. But they're realizing, especially platforms not named Shopify, they're all starting to realize, Jesus, Shopify now is kind of the incumbent in almost every single B2C, D2C project we can have a chance of getting into. And so it becomes a place of displacing an incumbent, which is really hard, especially when it's a strong incumbent like Shopify, right? Shopify is not a weak player and they've mastered marketing to the nth degree. And so from a mind share and market share perspective, they're just an absolute juggernaut that is going to be almost impossible to stop at this stage. And so, and because there's also a demographic issue with how B2Cs have implemented e-commerce over the last, say, 10 plus years, in that the stats show in the US somewhere around 98% of retailers already offer e-commerce in some way, whereas only 40 to 60% of B2Bs offer e-commerce today. So the greenfields opportunities in B2B, and we also have to look at the sheer size of the market. Like the size of B2B, the size of the B2B market is 8 to 10x what the size of the retail market is, right? And it's looking to be that size, 8 to 10x more opportunity in the B2B world from an e-commerce perspective till at least 2030. And so the reality is most of these vendors are out there and they're looking at this going, okay, cool. We could go up against Shopify in the retail world and get our ass handed to us 9 out of 10 times, or simply not be able to displace them as an incumbent because there's not that many greenfields opportunities out there in retail anymore. Or we can go hammer and tongs at this B2B space, which is kind of open slather. There's like 40 major B2B platforms out there. There's no clear winner yet. And we have a real chance out there. Not only are there more greenfield opportunities out there, but there's no clear winner yet. And so the market hasn't consolidated in B2B yet the way that the retail e-commerce market has consolidated around a single one or two vendors. And so I think they're all looking at this going, if we don't nail B2B, we're looking to be acquired or merge or do something like that. And we're seeing M&A activity in the B2B world accelerate because of that very thing. They're going, geez, okay, we don't have enough financial runway. We're getting our ass handed to us by Shopify. We're really struggling with this whole B2B thing. And as a result of that, we're seeing it from the agency side because there's not a lot of agency capability around there, around B2B, or at least certainly compared to B2C and D2C, there's not as much agency capability. So we're seeing the likes of Zaylab acquire 2, 3, 4 agencies that are really strong in B2B because they want to acqui-hire these specialists in B2B because they're so hard to find out there in the market. They're not as, retail e-commerce specialists are a dime a dozen. There's literally tens of thousands of them out there. There is probably only 1% of that total that knows anything about B2B or has any experience in B2B. So that's what we're seeing play out. So we're starting to see M&A activity happen from a platform perspective, and we're starting to see M&A activity happen from a agency perspective because of the growth opportunity in B2B over the next decade.
And the ecosystem's always evolving. And historically, B2B was always seen as evolving slower than B2C in adoption of new technologies around product discovery, personalization, like data platforms. But that has changed massively. How are you seeing? So let's take agentic commerce. And in the D2C world, there's been big announcements. Shopify announcing its partnership with Google for the agentic protocol. How are the big B2B e-commerce platforms, I guess the vendors you mentioned, so like Oro, Kibo, Better, how are they adapting platforms and modernizing to help the B2B businesses tap into this capability?
So two of the biggest areas I'm seeing right now where AI and agentic capability is starting to really make an impact are on the agentic procurement side. So the major e-procurement platform vendors, the Jaggers, the Coupas, the Ariba's of the world, they are starting to rapidly build out agentic procurement capabilities in the e-procurement platforms that they deliver to market. But they don't yet, in all instances, have agentic systems or MPC servers or anything else, MCP servers on the supply side to connect to. And this is the gap, right? So the vendors in the B2B world are starting to rapidly build out MCP services, ACP, UCP. They're adopting Onyx, the Order Network Exchange. They're starting to adopt these standards in their platform so that they have an interface for the e-procurement platforms to talk to when they're doing their procurement. So this is kind of almost like EDI 2.0, right? Instead of using the EDI protocol, we're now using some sort of agentic protocol, usually based on MCP or one of its variants, to be able to facilitate that communication. The other thing that I'm starting to see be really relevant in the B2B world that I never thought was relevant in B2C and D2C, or only loosely relevant, but has become massively relevant in B2B, is to turn former communication only channels in the B2B world into effectively headless commerce channels with a combination of two forms of AI: multimodal and conversational AI. So historically in the B2B world, email, WhatsApp, Slack, Teams, etc., SMS, those were all just comms channels, right? To allow the customer to communicate with their sales rep, or to communicate with customer service, or to communicate with somebody on the supply side, right? Now we can actually turn those channels using a combination of multimodal and conversational AI. And there's standalone technologies out there that facilitate this, that basically turn those channels into not just transactional channels, but full-blown headless commerce channels. So if I want to check the inventory that somebody has, right, I can ask that question: hey, how much of this SKU do you have in stock? What's my buy price? How fast can you get it to me, right? Effectively, those are now, we have the same site search technology we have, but now we're interfacing with that technology via API instead of going into a portal and using a search bar, right? So this is where multimodal and conversational AI, or I send a message to my sales rep with a PDF of a PO attached to that message, right? Where my sales rep would historically have downloaded that from WhatsApp onto their desktop. They would key that order into their ERP, or they'd upload it into their ERP. Now, the intermediate technology sitting in the middle can take that, strip it out of the message, map it directly into the commerce system as if the customer logged into the commerce system and placed that order themselves in the commerce system. And then it goes through the standard order processing and fulfillment workflow it would go through. There's a final place where I think AI and agentic is starting to make a difference in the experiences that a customer expects through a portal beyond the transaction. So let's say you have a customer that transacts with you via EDI, or a customer that transacts with you via Punchout, right? So they're doing that all computer to computer. That's not happening with any human in the loop sort of scenario. But they still have an absolute expectation that they're able to log into a portal and get a whole suite of digital services in that portal that goes way beyond the transaction. So being able to lodge a digital quote request, being able to lodge a digital RMA request, being able to check inventory, pricing, MOQs, buying increments, being able to check the status of my credit account. There's a whole truckload of services. Being able to upload a diagram or a design into a portal and say, okay, here's my CAD drawing. Here's the stuff I need for this project. Can you supply it, right? These are the types of services that these guys, now the customer expects beyond just the supply of a good from their warehouse to my job site, for example. That stuff is starting to be mediated via AI in ways, and automated via AI in ways that was not possible even 2 years ago. So those are the big three areas that I'm seeing AI and agentic really starting. Sure, there's some stuff with PIM systems and auto enrichment and platforms like Rastro and other platforms like that that can help brands bring, a wide range of product information let's say I'm a distributor, and let's say I sell 5 million SKUs, which is pretty common in distribution, right? Like 100,000 SKUs in retail is high, 5 million SKUs in distribution is common. Now we have a much bigger catalog we're trying to deal with here, right? That we're trying to enrich with images and structured data and all this sort of stuff. And so there are AI technologies that are making this easier. Some of it's inside PIM systems, some of it's pre-PIM. But the reality is that from a agentic commerce perspective, it's in all those historic touch points where they have not been commerce enabled that now they can be. And that's the exciting bit.
One of the big challenges it's not unique to B2B, but one of the big challenges around digital transformation, you touched upon it earlier about businesses need to be ready and people need to be motivated to be able to buy into the fact that this is going to be beneficial to them, their role, the wider business. But it's really hard with a proliferated industry. Like you said, how, there are lots of different B2B vendors. There isn't a number one leader ubiquitous across. You take a region like North America, take the Americas, take Europe. There's no one global dominant player in that way. How do you if someone's listening and they're a B2B supplier, they're a seller, and they know that their tech's a bit outdated and they want to modernize and they want to improve, how do you advise people make sense of the industry and be able to ask the right questions to narrow down and go, this is the type of platform? Because you're right, you don't start with the tech, you start with business needs, goals, the functional things you need, the solution you're looking for, and the outcomes you're looking for before you even consider a vendor. But how do they get to that point?
I think one of the biggest challenges, and I'm working with a very large distributor in the United States right now who's going through this. So they've been on their existing e-commerce platform for a decade, right? So they haven't been in market looking at platforms for over 10 years. And so when they came to me, they said, we don't even know what's possible. So we've been customizing this platform for our unique needs for 10 years, right? We've been actively developing our current implementation for 10 years. Like what maybe someone who's brand new to e-commerce, their MVP might be down here. Our MVP is up here because we have such advanced capabilities that we've customized in our current platform. And so one of the biggest issues is when I go in and I'm working with these companies, they don't even know how to identify their requirements, let alone document them, right? They don't know how to do a pan business discovery. So this particular distributor, we had 175 plus question discovery accelerator, which I put my clients through as part of my framework. We had 14 follow-up remote discovery workshops, so 14 hours of remote discovery workshops as a follow-up to that before I could even start drafting their BRD, their business requirements document. Now, some of this also comes down to doing a little bit of consulting on the fly as we're going through discovery, because they don't even know what's possible, and they're quite open in many cases. They're open to changing processes. They're open to changing what technology does what. They're kind of open to all kinds of change if they think it's going to be beneficial for their business. But what they struggle with is going, we don't necessarily want to just recreate what we have and then build from there, but we don't know what's possible to change, what's possible to automate, what should be automated, what 10 years ago was difficult to automate, but now is kind of out of the box with some of these systems. We don't know what's possible. And so it's very difficult, I think, when you're inside the fishbowl, like these types of businesses are, even if they have deep capabilities internally from an e-commerce perspective, even if they've got a decent size, like this company has a decent size e-commerce team, right? But certainly when we think about merchandising, we think about product data, we think like if we take all those people and we kind of lump them into the e-commerce box, they probably got a team of like 20 plus inside their businesses dedicated to digital capabilities, right? So it's not a small team, and they know a lot, but they know a lot about their business and the way that their business, and this is a third generation family-owned distribution company, right? Very successful, but they're also going through a rapid period of expansion where they're acquiring tons of competitors, regional competitors, trying to fold those businesses, and they all have different ERPs. They've all got different sales processes. They've all got different SKUs. Like it's a nightmare, right? And so they just don't know what's possible. And so oftentimes my remit is to expand their mind with what's possible nowadays with new technology, new processes, and what level of adaptability they're going to need to have to take advantage of this new stuff. And so really, oftentimes, they want to do these things anyway. The consultancy is really just there to give them air cover to actually execute on it. And so, we're up to the BRD now. It's in its second round of approval inside the business. We're up to 57 pages, right? There is no way. It is absolutely unthinkable that a business like this, who's focused on distributing the stuff they sell, it is absolutely unthinkable that they would be able to draft this BRD on their own. It's impossible. So either they need to be working with an SI that has this deep consulting capability internally, but the reality is most SIs don't, because they only specialize in 1, 2, 3 platforms, right? Whereas these guys, they wanted to cast the net wide. They said, if we're going to have to do a replatform project, we want to look at all of our options, and not just from an e-commerce perspective, but also from PIM and from integration middleware, and we want to look at everything. We want to look at the whole digital stack very holistically. And so, there is no easy answer, especially for well-established businesses that have well-established processes. They don't even know which processes to question. And so, like you pointed out, the key is understanding what's possible, understanding what isn't working that well inside the business, identifying areas for immediate improvement, road mapping out what does this look like over the next 12, 24, 36 months, getting them comfortable with the decision and the investments that they need to make. And they don't even know, because it's been 10 years since they bought a technology, they're like, we don't even know what a realistic budget is. We have no idea. We don't know what modern technology costs, not only to pay a license for, but also from an implementation perspective. We have no idea what this should cost. So should it cost $100,000 to implement, or should it cost $500,000 to implement? We have no idea. So having somebody that's been through 10, 20, 30 significant B2B projects in their career, that becomes really important. That experience becomes really important. So I think there are no easy answers. And I know that's kind of bullshit, consultant speak, but literally it does depend on how much capability you have internally versus how much you need to bring in to supplement what you already think you know.
I think that's an honest answer. I think I do fewer B2B projects than you, but I've done quite a few over the years. I've probably done about 5 or 6 specialist B2B ones. And I think I personally find it's a harder tech stack ecosystem decision to make than it is in a lot of B2C projects, with the exception of really complex global B2C businesses, which have huge regional variations and process differences, etc. But the market in D2C is consolidated far quicker, and that means that there's a cleaner set of decision points. And there, you're right, the operational processes vary so wildly across, whether you're talking in like to high-end complex manufacturing, which I don't work with, to medical supplies, to just simple wholesale models. That, I think that makes a lot of sense. My final question for you is, we talked a lot about trends, buying evolution, the platforms, and the agentic. But what other areas of tech evolution within the B2B ecosystem are you excited about? So, are there specific product types, solution areas where actually B2B solutions are really advancing, whether that's loyalty or true personalization, product discovery? Now, which areas are you most excited around?
So this is going to sound like it's coming out of left field, but I assure you it is not. So I have just started to put together an entire section of my website called the Compliance First B2B Commerce Info Hub. And so you probably remember, because you've been in this industry for a long time, nearly basically as long as I have. And I think if we cast our mind back to, say, 15 maybe 20 years ago, when retail e-commerce really went mainstream, where it was starting to become odd if you're a retailer and you didn't do e-commerce, like it was starting to become strange, right? But there were several industries, there was a handful, maybe 5 or 10 industries that were very, very late to the e-commerce game because of the complexity. Even though they were retail, there was massive complexity in what they did. So think furniture, think grocery, think like there was just, and most of the time it was around logistics, product complexity, virtual SKUs. Like they just had so much inherent complexity, very different to a fashion brand wanting to send a t-shirt to somebody's door, right? And so those industries took an extra 5 to 10 years to adopt e-commerce because there was an entire ecosystem of capability, fulfillment, logistics, OMS, WMS, IMS capabilities. There was a whole suite of capabilities that didn't yet exist, even once e-commerce went mainstream in the retail world. I am seeing the exact same situation play out today in B2B. So low-hanging B2B is your traditional wholesale distributor who works in the HVAC and plumbing industry. And so that industry is well known. We already have the logistics around less than trailer load. We already have logistics around, okay, cool, I've got a 500 line order, but I need this part of the order to arrive on the job site these dates, this part of the order to arrive on like a lot of those industries are well known, well understood, and well handled with common, modern B2B systems, capabilities, and processes. There is an entire world of complex B2B, which is either highly complex and or massively regulated and compliance driven. Okay. So those industries are going to be the last ones to be serviced by tech platforms. They're the last ones to be serviced by consultants because there's not many consultants that understand those industries. And they are the last ones that are going to be serviced by SIs because there's not many SIs out there. Even if they do heavy B2B work, they've never worked in massively regulated B2B industry. So I've created 4 buckets of these industries, and there's many sub-industries underneath them, starting with controlled substances. So think cannabis, alcohol, wine, spirits, tobacco, cigars, snus, vaping, e-nicotine, pharmaceuticals, nutraceuticals, supplements, medical grade narcotics. So that's the type of things that would fit under controlled substances. Then we have the second bucket, hazardous materials and e-mobility, right? There's like 10 industries that sit underneath those. Then we have national security, defense, GovCon, and firearms. Like there's like 15 industries that sit underneath that bucket that are so massively regulated that if you don't integrate in with the compliance systems as part of the commerce process, you basically can't sell online in those industries. The fourth bucket is heavy industry and precision infrastructure. So things like medtech and surgical devices, life sciences and research equipment, energy, oil, gas, infrastructure, heavy construction materials, automotive OEM and aftermarket. So I've developed these 4 buckets of highly complex B2B that today are still to this day, are massively underserved. And those are the industries that I'm really focusing on over the next coming couple of years. And I'm also doing deals with platform vendors to help them create editions of their platforms specifically for these industries, so that their platforms can be pre-configured to service these industries with pre-configured integrations with the certifying governing bodies, et cetera, to make e-commerce in these industries easier, faster, and more seamless whilst remaining compliant. So that to me is the most exciting thing that is going to be normalized in B2B over the next 1 to 5 years.
So just a small thing then, yeah?
Just little.
Excellent. Look, Jason, I really appreciate you coming to the podcast. I know you're exhausted after traveling to London and back to run a B2B conference as well. So much appreciated. For anyone listening whose interest has been piqued by what we've covered and wants to potentially reach out and pick Jason's brain or discuss a project, his contact details are on the landing page, and you can also look him up on LinkedIn. Jason Greenwood, easy name to remember and find. Pleasure talking to you, sir.
Thank you so much for your time, and you're a great host. Ask great questions. Fantastic conversation. Really appreciate it.
And thanks as always, everyone, for listening. Do keep your ears peeled for the next episode. Take care, everybody. You're listening to the Inside Commerce podcast hosted by experienced consultants James Gerd and Paul Rogers. Inside Commerce is your fast track to digital knowledge, featuring interviews with leading e-commerce retailers, industry thought leaders, and the C-suite of key tech companies to explore the latest in digital strategy, customer experience, and tech. Discover what the latest trends really mean and get practical advice based on experience to help fine-tune your e-com strategy and tech stack. Follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to James or Paul if you'd like to discuss an e-commerce project. We hope you enjoy the latest episode.